Have you ever truly looked into a mirror? Not at your reflection, but through it? Most people never do. They see their faces, their hair, the expression they want the world to believe in, but behind the glass, there's something heavier, something that watches you back. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That's the moment when the mirror stops being a surface and becomes a wound. Because what if your fate has never been written by destiny, but by everything inside you that you refuse to face? The truth is, most of us live as actors in a play we didn't write. We perfect our roles, our smiles, our opinions, and yet, deep down, something aches. A quiet voice whispers, "This isn't you." But we silence it, afraid that listening might tear apart the entire story we've built to survive. Looking into yourself isn't poetic, it's violent, because to face who you really are means to lose who you thought you were. It means seeing not just your light, but the hunger, envy, pride, weakness, and shadow that live beneath the surface. Jung called this confrontation the beginning of individuation, the path toward wholeness. But he never said it would be beautiful. So before we go further, ask yourself, what are you running from? What mask have you worn for so long that you forgot the face underneath? Because if you stay with me in this journey, we're not chasing comfort, we're chasing truth. And truth doesn't flatter, it transforms. If this kind of reflection speaks to you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share in the comments. When was the last time you faced yourself without looking away? Every person you meet is wearing a mask, and so are you. Not because we want to deceive, but because the world taught us it's safer to hide. From childhood, we learn which parts of ourselves are acceptable, which are too loud, too soft, too strange. Slowly, we start editing our souls, shaping our identity around the expectations of others. And the tragedy is that the more we are loved for the mask, the more terrified we become of showing the face beneath it. Jung called this mask the persona, the version of us we present to the world. It's not evil, it's a survival tool. Without it, we wouldn't function in society. But when the persona becomes our only identity, something dies inside. We start to believe the illusion, forgetting that there's a vast, chaotic self hidden behind it, one that holds our deepest fears, passions, and contradictions. You see, the mask protects us from rejection, but it also isolates us from authenticity. It gives us approval, but it steals our truth. We play our roles, the strong one, the kind one, the smart one, and we start mistaking the performance for reality, until one day something cracks. Maybe it's heartbreak, failure, loss, or the simple exhaustion of pretending. The mask slips, and for a moment we glimpse what we've been hiding. From all along, ourselves. That's when the real journey begins, because beneath every mask lies a face trembling to be seen, not perfect, not polished, but real. And though removing the mask feels like dying, what truly dies is the illusion. What's born in its place is something raw, honest, and alive. Take a moment to ask yourself, who are you when no one's watching? If that question makes you uncomfortable, it's because the truth beneath your mask is waiting, patiently, to be remembered. There's a reason we avoid silence. In silence, the voices we've buried start to whisper again. The memories we've hidden crawl back to the surface. The parts of ourselves we swore we'd never feel again begin to breathe. That's why most people never face their inner world. Not because they can't, but because they're terrified of what they might find there. The mind is a labyrinth, and at its center lies the shadow, the collection of everything we've denied, our rage, our jealousy, our shame, our impulses. We push it down, hoping that ignorance will equal peace. But repression doesn't erase, it festers. It becomes the invisible hand guiding our choices, shaping our relationships, and haunting our nights. Jung warned that the more we repress the unconscious, the darker it becomes. The shadow doesn't vanish just because you pretend it's not there. It waits. It leaks through sarcasm, through projection, through the sudden anger you can't explain. It shows itself in the people you despise, because in them you meet the pieces of yourself you refuse to own. So we distract ourselves. We scroll, we drink, we stay busy, we chase pleasure, anything to keep the silence away. But deep down, we know. We sense that behind every distraction is a mirror we haven't dared to look into, and the longer we avoid it, the heavier it gets. But here's the paradox. What you fear most is also what can free you. The darkness inside isn't your enemy, it's your unintegrated truth. When you finally stop running and face it, trembling, yes, but honest, something remarkable happens. The monster you feared turns into a teacher. The chaos becomes clarity. So don't be afraid of what's hidden. Be afraid of never finding it, because the longer you hide from your shadow, the more power it has over you. And only when you meet it face to face can you begin to understand who you truly are. What if the people who irritate you the most are not your enemies, but your reflections? Every trait we reject in others is a fragment of ourselves we've refused to meet. That's the cruel beauty of the shadow. It doesn't hide only in our darkness, but in our judgments. When you point a finger, the shadow smiles, because it knows you're only pointing at yourself. Carl Jung described the shadow as the sum of all we repress, the impulses, desires, and memories that clash with the image we want to uphold. We exile them into the unconscious, hoping they'll disappear. But they don't. They watch, from beneath, waiting for the smallest crack in the mask to slip through. And when they do, we call it a mistake, a moment of weakness, a lapse in character. But in truth, it's the self begging to be seen. We are raised to chase light, to be kind, moral, positive, spiritual. Yet without the night, the stars would have no meaning. Your darkness isn't a defect, it's the part of you that holds your authenticity. The anger you hide may be your passion misdirected. The envy you deny may point to the potential you've abandoned. The fear you suppress may guard the courage you've forgotten. But integrating the shadow isn't about glorifying pain or surrendering to chaos. It's about honesty. To look at your reflection and say, yes, that, too, is me. To stop fighting the parts that scare you and start listening to what they're trying to teach. Because the moment you stop rejecting yourself, the war within you begins to end. So let me ask you, not as a question of theory, but of truth, what is the one thing about yourself you're most afraid to see? Take a breath. Be brave enough to write it in the comments. You might discover that naming your shadow is the first step toward reclaiming your light. There comes a moment when the mirror no longer lies. You've seen too much of yourself to ever go back. The illusions you once believed in, the image, the persona, the comforting narratives, begin to dissolve. And in their absence, something heavy settles in your chest, the realization that awareness is not peace and its responsibility. To awaken is to see through the game, to recognize how much of your life has been built on unconscious repetition, inherited beliefs, old fears, familiar patterns. It's the sudden awareness that you've been both the prisoner and the guard. And once you see the bars, you can no longer pretend they're invisible. Jung understood that consciousness is a burden, because to become aware means you can no longer blame fate or luck or anyone else. You see, your shadow, your choices, your complicity in your own suffering. And that's why awakening often feels like grief, the death of who you used to be. The comfort of ignorance fades, and in its place grows a vast, silent knowing. You are the architect of your own chaos. But within that weight lies freedom. Awareness may burn, but it also purifies. It strips you of false identities until only the essential remains. And though it hurts to carry that truth, it's far lighter than living a lie. This is the paradox of awakening. It doesn't make life easier, it makes it real. It demands honesty where you once wore masks, courage where you once obeyed fear. It asks you to stop running from yourself and start walking toward the unknown, carrying both your light and your darkness with equal reverence. So when the world around you feels heavy and your awareness feels like a curse, remember this. It's not the weight of the world you're carrying. It's the weight of finally becoming whole. There comes a breaking point, a moment when the mask no longer fits, when every word you speak feels rehearsed, when even your reflection looks like a stranger. That's the beginning of collapse, not of your life, but of your character. The persona you've spent years perfecting starts to crumble under the weight of your own truth. You begin to sense it in small ways. The conversations that once entertained you feel empty. The ambitions that once drove you lose their shine. The people who once validated you no longer understand you. It feels like decay, but it's not. It's a quiet dismantling, the ego's funeral. The identity you've worshipped is being stripped away so that the self beneath can finally breathe. Jung described this as a form of psychological death, the dissolution of the false self. And like all deaths, it's terrifying, because the mind clings to what is known, even when it's suffocating. You may feel lost, directionless, numb. You may even believe you're falling apart. But in truth, something ancient and authentic is emerging beneath the ruins. The collapse of the character is the collapse of illusion. It's the moment you stop playing the role you were assigned and start remembering the one you were born to live. Every breakdown becomes a doorway, every loss a revelation. The fire that consumes your old identity is the same fire that forges your soul. And in the ashes, you begin to see something you've forgotten. Simplicity. You no longer need to perform goodness or strength or wisdom. You simply are, raw, human, awake. So when your world starts to fall apart, don't rush to rebuild it. Let it burn. Because only when the old story dies can the truth finally take its place. There comes a moment in every honest journey when everything you thought you were begins to fall apart. The roles, the ideals, the labels, all the little stories you built to make sense of yourself start to dissolve. You try to hold them together, but they slip through your fingers like sand. That's not failure. That's the collapse of the character, the death of the false self that was never meant to last. At first it feels like destruction. You look around and nothing feels solid anymore. The things that once gave you meaning, success, validation, control, now seem hollow. You might wake up one day and realize you don't recognize your own voice. Conversations feel like scripts. Smiles feel like masks. The more aware you become, the more alien your own life feels. It's not that you've lost yourself. It's that you're meeting yourself for the first time. Carl Jung described this phase as a psychic death, a dismantling of the ego's architecture. It's what happens when your consciousness outgrows your persona. The mind, desperate to preserve order, resists. It panics, clings to old identities, and calls the process depression, confusion, or failure. But beneath that suffering, something sacred is taking place. The birth of the authentic self. When the character collapses, the performance ends. You begin to see that most of what you called life was theater, a beautiful illusion created to earn belonging. And now, with the stage lights dimmed, you find yourself in the silence behind the act. It's disorienting, yes, but in that silence there's truth, a pulse, a presence that doesn't need to pretend. Every breakdown whispers a secret. What is falling apart is not you, but everything that was never truly you. The relationships that no longer resonate, the goals that no longer inspire, the stories that no longer fit. They crumble because the soul refuses to live in imitation any longer. So when the mask cracks and the character you've played for years begins to dissolve, don't rush to rebuild. Let the ashes settle. Let the silence expand. Because what you'll find beneath the ruins is not emptiness. It's the unedited, unfiltered essence of who you were always meant to be. When the old identity collapses, what follows is silence. A vast, hollow silence that feels unbearable at first, as if life has lost its meaning. You wake up and everything that once anchored you, your ambitions, your relationships, even your beliefs, feels distant, unreal. You are no longer who you were, but not yet who you are becoming. This in-between space is what many avoid. Jung called it the dark night of the soul. I call it the void. The void isn't punishment. It's the pause between destruction and creation, the sacred space where your soul reconfigures itself. But it feels like drowning. The mind screams for direction, for certainty, for anything that resembles the old order, yet no answer comes, only silence. And in that silence, something ancient begins to whisper. Stay. To stay in the void requires courage, because every instinct pushes you to escape. You'll want to fill the emptiness with distractions, new goals, new people, new philosophies, anything to silence the discomfort of not knowing. But the void has its own wisdom. It strips you of everything false until only the essential remains. It's not emptiness you're feeling. It's purity, the absence of noise, of pretense, of everything that once kept you numb. Jung believed that this descent into the unknown is the foundation of true individuation. The ego must die so that the self can emerge. And that emergence doesn't happen in clarity, but in darkness. The void is the womb of transformation, a silent forge where identity burns away, leaving only consciousness. So if you find yourself lost, weightless, disconnected, don't rush to rebuild. Sit with the emptiness. Let it teach you that you are not what you've lost, nor what you will become. You are the awareness watching both unfold. Now, I want to hear from you, honestly. Have you ever experienced this void, that strange silence after losing who you thought you were? Share your experience in the comments. Someone out there might find light in your story. After the silence of the void, something begins to shift. Not dramatically, but quietly, like dawn breaking after a long night. You start to see fragments of yourself returning, but this time, they look different, softer, truer. You no longer crave to be only light, nor do you fear your darkness. You begin to understand that both have always belonged to you. This is the beginning of integration, the moment the divided self starts to remember its wholeness. Integration isn't about perfection or eternal peace. It's about honesty. It's the recognition that every flaw, every mistake, every desire and fear you once rejected has something to teach you. The light without the shadow is sterile. The shadow without the light is chaos. Wholeness is found in the tension between them, in the courage to hold both without judgment. Jung taught that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That's what you've been doing all along, learning to look into yourself without flinching. The pain, the shame, the loneliness, they were never enemies, only unacknowledged parts of your own humanity. And as you face them, they begin to lose their power. What once felt like poison becomes medicine. Integration feels subtle at first. You start forgiving more easily. You listen before reacting. You stop needing every moment to make sense. You begin to trust the unfolding of things, not because you understand them, but because you no longer need control. The ego loosens its grip, and in that space compassion grows. This stage is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you've always been beneath the noise, the one who can hold both light and darkness with equal love. The one who doesn't divide the self into good or bad, but sees the divine in both. And when that happens, something extraordinary occurs. Peace, not as an escape from life, but as its deepest acceptance. The war within you finally begins to quiet. And for the first time, you feel it, not relief, but presence, not perfection, but truth. The deeper you go, the more you realize that awakening isn't a rising above life, it's a falling into it. The illusions fade, but what remains is not a constant bliss. It's truth, raw, unfiltered and heavy, because to see reality as it is, without masks, without fantasies, is to confront both the beauty and the brutality of being alive. The truth doesn't comfort, it clarifies. It strips away the narratives that kept you numb, the stories that made you feel safe. You begin to see how much of your suffering came not from the world, but from your resistance to it, your refusal to let things be what they are. That realization hurts. You feel exposed, vulnerable, unarmored. But that's also where real freedom begins. In the moment you stop demanding that life protect you from itself. Carl Jung believed that wholeness is not achieved by escaping conflict, but by enduring it consciously. When you stop dividing your experience into good and bad, You allow existence to breathe through you. You start to see that the pain you feared was not punishment, but purification. The shadow you avoided was never darkness. It was the seed of light waiting to be seen. And yes, the truth weighs heavy. It breaks the illusions that once made you feel secure. But that same truth, when carried with awareness, transforms weight into grounding. You begin to walk differently, slower, deeper, more awake. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to run. You exist in quiet understanding. Everything you sought outside was always within. Freedom isn't lightness, it's presence. The awakened mind doesn't float above life. It kneels within it, eyes open, heart bare. The truth doesn't rescue you. It invites you to participate fully, without pretending. And when you accept that invitation, even the heaviest truths become wings. Because liberation isn't found in escaping the human experience. It's in embracing it completely, shadow and all. The weight remains, but now it carries you. After walking through shadow, silence, and truth, something begins to awaken inside you. Not a new self, but the real one that has been quietly waiting beneath all the layers. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It simply is. That's what it means to return to essence, to no longer chase meaning, but to live it, to stop seeking awakening as an achievement and start recognizing it as your natural state, the quiet awareness that has always been watching, even when you were lost. You begin to realize that all your efforts to become were never leading you anywhere new. They were leading you back to simplicity, back to stillness, back to the silent witness behind your thoughts. The journey was never about finding yourself. It was about remembering that you were never truly gone. In this space, life feels different. Time slows. Small things, light on a wall, wind through a window, a stranger's. Smile. Begin to feel sacred. You're no longer trying to fix the moment, you're finally in it. The noise of the ego fades, replaced by a gentle hum of presence. You forgive more easily, because you understand. You love more deeply, because you no longer fear loss. You no longer need to arrive because you've realized there was never anywhere else to go. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And now you understand, becoming who you are is not an act of creation, but of surrender. The light and the shadow, the joy and the sorrow, they all belong to you. The soul doesn't want perfection, it wants wholeness. So here we are, at the end of this path, or maybe the beginning of another. You've faced the mirror, met the shadow, walked through the void, and emerged not as something greater, but as something truer. And if you're still here, still listening, still feeling, that means you've already begun to awaken. If this journey resonated with you, take a moment, breathe, then leave a comment below telling me, what truth did you find within yourself while walking through your own shadow? And if you haven't yet, subscribe, leave a like, and stay with me for the next video, where we'll dive even deeper into the hidden patterns that shape the human soul. Because this quiet recognition of yourself is not the end. It's the beginning of something timeless.